The Good Morning America set had seen its share of high-profile interviews, but nothing quite like this. It was a calm July morning in New York City, but inside Studio 45, tension simmered just beneath the surface. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex and lightning rod of public opinion, was about to go live. She entered the studio with the grace and poise of someone who had walked both red carpets and palace halls. Dressed in a sleek, cream-colored pantsuit, Meghan smiled warmly, nodding at the producers and stagehands before taking her seat across from co-anchor Michael Strahan. Viewers at home would see nothing but a polished set and two professionals about to engage in what was billed as a candid, unfiltered conversation. But behind the scenes, whispers of unease had already begun. There had been last-minute changes to Meghan's talking points, and her publicist had raised concerns about unexpected questions. Still, the Duchess insisted she was ready. Strahan opened the segment with practiced ease. Joining us this morning is Meghan Markle, actress, philanthropist, mother, and of course, author of the highly talked about memoir Unwritten Royalty. He smiled, his tone friendly. Meghan, it's good to have you back on GMA. Meghan returned the smile, offering a calm, thank you, Michael. It's good to be here. The first few minutes followed the usual script. They discussed motherhood, Meghan's work with women's shelters in LA, and a touching anecdote from her book about Archie's first steps on a beach in Santa Barbara. The audience, both in studio and at home, was charmed. She was eloquent, vulnerable, relatable, the Meghan her supporters always said she was. But then, around the 6-minute mark, the interview took a sharp turn. Strahan sat forward, the smile fading from his face. His voice dropped ever so slightly in tone. Let's talk about something a bit more complex. In your book, Meghan, you write that you never sought the spotlight. That you were forced into it by the media. But over the past few years, you've signed multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix, Spotify, and now you're reportedly in talks with a major fashion house. Help us understand how that aligns with your call for privacy. There it was, the pivot everyone backstage had anticipated but hoped wouldn't happen so soon. Meghan didn't flinch, but the warmth in her eyes dimmed. Wanting to tell your own story, on your own terms, isn't the same as chasing fame, she replied. Her tone remained measured, but her expression betrayed a flicker of annoyance. Strahan nodded, as if giving her room, but then followed up quickly. Sure, but there's a difference between controlling your narrative and monetizing it. Some say you stepped away from royal duties only to step into Hollywood-style fame. Were these deals already in motion before your departure from the royal family? Meghan's smile grew tight. We stepped away to protect our mental health and our family's peace. We didn't have a plan at first, Michael. We were just trying to survive. Strahan raised an eyebrow. And yet, there are documents, emails, that suggest there were discussions with streaming platforms and media agents well before you officially exited the royal circle. Some have even suggested that Unwritten Royalty was partially outlined before the final royal tour. At this, Meghan's jaw tensed. I've been honest about the timeline, she said. We had informal talks, but nothing concrete. And frankly, those discussions wouldn't surprise anyone who was in our position, cut off financially, security stripped, facing relentless media harassment. You plan, or you drown. There was a long pause, the kind that sends producers reaching nervously for their earpieces. Strahan didn't blink. So you're saying, the brand, the deals, the memoir, those were reactive, not strategic. Meghan nodded slowly. That's exactly what I'm saying. But Strahan wasn't done. I respect your answer, Meghan. But the American public has a good memory. In 2020, you and Prince Harry told Oprah you just wanted peace. Since then, you've launched a podcast, a docuseries, and a lifestyle brand. Do you think your version of peace might look a lot like calculated influence? Meghan tilted her head, just slightly. If telling my truth, on my terms, makes people uncomfortable, then maybe we need to ask why that is. The air in the studio was electric. For the first time, the carefully choreographed media dance Meghan had mastered began to show signs of tension. She hadn't cracked, but she had, for a moment, shown the strain. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Meghan's publicist stood with arms crossed, mouth tight. In Michael Strahan, he knew exactly what he had just done. The showdown had only just begun. The silence in the studio was deafening. Meghan's poised demeanor hadn't completely cracked, but the room felt it. The shift, the tension, the stakes, something had changed, and the audience, both in the studio and across millions of screens, was leaning forward, captivated. Meghan adjusted slightly in her chair, her eyes narrowing at Strahan. "You're framing this like I've committed a crime," she said quietly, but firmly. "Is it so wrong to want to own your story after being silenced for years?" Strahan held her gaze, not with malice, but with a steadiness that said he wasn't backing down. "No one's saying it's a crime," he replied. "But the timing matters. Transparency matters. You've spoken a lot about truth. So here's the truth, Meghan, when people see a disconnect between your words and your actions, they start asking questions. That's not an attack. That's accountability." Meghan inhaled slowly, her jaw tight. "Accountability goes both ways, Michael," she said. "You know how this industry works. Headlines are rarely about facts, they're about clicks. My family was hunted, our lives were dissected, and when we finally said, enough, suddenly we became villains. No one survives that kind of machine unless they learn how to play the game." Strahan nodded slightly. "I hear you, but you're not just playing the game, you're thriving in it. You've become one of the most recognizable public figures in the world. Some say you used the royal exit as a launchpad. Are you saying that's just survival?" Meghan's eyes flashed. "I'm saying we were thrown into the deep end, and we had two choices, sink or swim. And we swam." Just then, Strahan glanced down at the folder on the table in front of him, a manila envelope that had gone unnoticed until now. His voice dropped in tone. "We were given access to some documents from a source close to the palace. Internal correspondence, emails. These suggest that conversations about commercial partnerships, including with a major talent agency and production company, began before the Sussexes officially stepped down." Meghan froze for half a beat. The pause was imperceptible to some, but not to the cameras. Not to the viewers at home. She recovered quickly. "Michael, if people were speaking about us, that doesn't mean we initiated those talks. These weren't third-party conversations," Strahan said, lifting the folder. "There's an email in here dated November 2019, 2 months before your royal exit, where your team outlines branding opportunities, media pitches, and potential speaking tours. That's well before you claimed you'd even considered stepping away." Gasps rippled from the in-studio audience. Meghan's publicist took a step toward the set, but one of the producers subtly motioned for them to stay back. Meghan's expression hardened. "Are we really doing this, Liv?" she asked, almost under her breath. Strahan didn't blink. "You said you wanted truth, Meghan. I'm giving you a chance to address it." Meghan leaned forward, her voice low, measured. "I'm not going to dignify a smear campaign orchestrated by the very institution that pushed us out. If there are emails, so be it. My team did their job. They looked at what was possible if we were no longer under the Crown's control. That's called being prepared. But some would call that a plan," Strahan countered. "And some would call it survival," she shot back. "We were being threatened. Our security was being removed. We had no income. Of course we explored options. Wouldn't you?" Strahan paused. "The audience has the right to decide. But walking away now, without addressing this directly, some will see that as avoidance." Meghan's jaw clenched. She glanced off camera. The conversation had gone somewhere she hadn't intended, and certainly hadn't approved. "I've been in rooms with world leaders, with global